soon as I can. We're really glad to have everyone here today. And I'm really glad to introduce a good friend of mine, someone that I've known almost the whole time since I started working with SGR back in 2011, because Will Hampton was at that time the director of communications or communications department head at the city of Round Rock, Texas, down in the Austin area. And some of the first projects I worked on was going to Round Rock along with our friend Randy Mayu. Randy would present books and then I would facilitate discussion. And I got to know Will and many others that were on that staff, that incredible staff. And some of them have moved on and done some other things since then, including Will, who now is a senior vice president with SGR and really an amazing communications expert. And we've leaned on him internally. We've used him in workshops. He's a really good friend. He's a great coach. And he's going to be talking today some about the work that the task force did for AFI on community engagement. And, there's never a time when that's not a big issue. And I think today it's a bigger issue than ever. And for local governments, and Will is a really experienced person in dealing with this, coaching about it, teaching about it. I think wherever you live, no matter what size your organization is, you're going to benefit from this. So, Will, thank you for being with us. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share. And we're really excited to hear what you have to say today.
Great. Well, Mike, thank you so much for that introduction. Let me get my screen shared properly here. Give me
No problem. It's hard sometimes. There you say you're in the presenter mode. So if you can go full screen, there you go.
Got you now. Good. Great. Yeah. So really, again, appreciate that introduction. And this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. Mike, I was thinking about my very first day working for the city of Round Rock. I was the first communications professional they had ever hired. This was back in 1998. Sat down with city manager Bob Bennett. And Bob, the very first thing he said to me was, Will, we've got to find a better way to do public hearings. That's how we talked about it in 1998. That's how unsophisticated we were in Round Rock at that time. We got a lot more sophisticated over the years through training, professional development, getting some of the better tools that we needed so we could effectively engage the public. For those of you who don't know about Round Rock, and Mike, I think it's the greatest city in America. It's not Grapevine, it's Round Rock. But Round Rock's just located north of Austin, so we've been a fast growth community for a long, long time, which means lots of new road projects, lots of utility infrastructure projects, some big economic development projects that all of these by their very nature are controversial. And so we had to get good at engaging the public in ways that were meaningful for the public and for the city so we could be effective and do the kind of things we needed to do to manage the growth that we were seeing and experiencing in Round Rock. And so this webinar today is all about how do you get better at having these conversations, because I think it's foundational to healthy local government. You've got to strengthen how you're talking with the public through better engagement and better training. And as Mike mentioned, today's webinar, and there's also a half-day workshop that we've put together that's based on the work that was done by the AFI task force that Mike referenced. These folks met over the course of a year, group of local government leaders, experts, to really take a fresh look at public discourse, not just what's wrong with it, the challenges, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but how can we build it up again? How can we, through intentional engagement, skill building, and community empowerment, get better and be more effective in how we govern? So I want to talk a little bit about why this is important now. Trust is lower than it has ever been for governments. And this is according to a survey that Pew does every year. The federal government and state governments are actually underwater when it comes to trust. And what I mean by that is more than half of the public does not trust them to act in the public's best interests. Local government is actually still on the right side of that question, where you have a majority of folks who do trust local government, but that trust is in decline, even for local governments. Polarization is higher than it's ever been. This us versus them mentality has taken root and has taken hold. The picture I've dropped into this slide is after November's election. And it's not just enough now that my guy or gal wins, it's that your guy or gal lost. You can see that sign on the right says "by loser!" exclamation point. That's just kind of the state of political discourse these days. It's not just that I won, but I'm going to rub it in that you lost. Um, and so these are things that were challenges that we're dealing with. Um, and I'll also say this, traditional meetings like the town hall, I think fall short. They don't really do a good enough job of engaging the public effectively in a way that helps us govern effectively. So let's talk a little bit more about the environment that we're operating in right now, because the environment has shifted from where I was back in '98 when I first started the city of Round Rock. It was simpler times for sure. Uh, Now, with the development of social media, it has gotten much more challenging. Um, the information environment has shifted, and I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but let me share with you a fact that you may not know. Um, it, you probably know that social media, those algorithms, and that is the software, the programming that decides what shows up in your news feed, rewards anger and vitriol. And so when you get those kind of comments on your Facebook pages, those get upranked and more people see them. What you need to remember, and this is what you might not know, is that 70% of the sentiment expressed on social media is actually the opposite of what the general public thinks about any given specific issue. So if you're just gauging public sentiment based on what you're hearing on Facebook, think again. You need to find some other tools for how to engage the public online. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in this webinar. Um, to the second point, there are more sources of information now than there ever been. And there's also some bad actors. There's some folks who are intentionally spreading misinformation or disinformation out there. Local news media, local papers are disappearing. And so that that third party that used to cover your council meetings is sometimes gone completely, or maybe it's understaffed now. And so you just don't get the kind of coverage that you used to get. And so that's part of one of the challenges that we're facing. And then more and more, you get people just who are just trolling for clicks. They're not interested in better government. They just want to get attention. And so there's also more emphasis on politics now and less emphasis on governance. And so I'm not naive enough to know that I understand that uh, politics and governance are tied together. But governance is what we're after. How do we implement those projects and programs that are best for the greatest majority of our residents? Not necessarily what's always going to win me more likes on a Facebook post. So all these trends we've talked about, they all create barriers to authentic and effective local engagement. But it's not all doom and gloom. I think we can absolutely flip the script on this. And I think if you that local governments can become trusted sources of information. It can. I have seen it happen. Saw it happen in Round Rock. Seen it happen in other communities where you can become that trusted source, and people can believe what you're putting out because trust is the coin of the realm. It is so critical. I believe you can only govern as well as you can persuade. And you cannot persuade someone who does not trust you. So that trust and how you talk to the public goes a long way towards building trust and building credibility. Dialogue with the public is key. We need to learn to talk with our residents, not just at them. We need to do a better job of listening. Uh, and when you pay people that kind of respect by listening, over time, they will respond in kind and treat you with respect as well. And I think local government is uniquely positioned to model the kind of respectful discourse that we don't see um, elsewhere in government. We're the closest form of government to the people. These are our streets, there are parks, our libraries, our police departments, our firefighters, our EMTs. We run into folks at the grocery store, at the Little League games. And so we have a unique opportunity to restore and rebuild trust. And we can do it in different ways now. I want to give a quick example here of what the city of Temple, Texas has done. Now, Temple is just about an hour's drive north of Round Rock, so it's in central Texas. It's close to Fort Cavazos, one of the largest military bases in North America. Great community, diverse community, very vibrant communities, like going on in Temple. And so the folks in Temple really wanted to build uh, a culture of effective citizen engagement. And so they did it in a really smart way. They created something they call the Temple Community Summit. And so what they did was every first Friday, um, they've got a plaza. They recently redid one of their plazas in downtown Temple, making a historic train depot, the Santa Fe Depot, and they do music concerts there the first Friday of the month. And so the city said, "Hey, let's do our community summit there." So we're going to have booths set up from every department where people can come walk up. They're already coming down to the first Friday event. They're there having a good time. It's a relaxed setting. It's an informal setting. It's where you can have a real dialogue with your residents. They can meet the folks who are serving them and they can learn what's going on in the city. What's Parks and Rec working on right now? What's the transportation department working on? What about the police, the firefighters? But they did something else that was really smart. They made sure that each department had set up an interactive activity or game that people could play. So they made it a little bit fun, made it a little bit engaging. And they also made sure that each department or booth had a giveaway that someone could take with them after they learned a little bit about what was going on and got to meet the people who served them. Was a huge hit, both externally, had hundreds of people showed up. Internally, it brought the staff a little bit closer together. And so those are the kind of things that we can do in local government that I don't think the state and the feds can do. So now let's talk about 4 steps to stronger engagement. So I'm going to kind of walk through this model. Again, this was something that was put together by this AFI task force that I think is just fantastic. It gives you a template that you can use as you're thinking about how we're going to go engage the public. And this is, what Temple did was kind of a broad-based project and objective. This is maybe for something that's a little more focused, like a road extension project, utility infrastructure, that kind of thing. And so this model starts with number one, identify not just the project itself, but I think you need to start with the problem. What's the problem that we're trying to solve with a particular project or program? I can tell you no one is interested in your solution until they believe that there is a problem. And so you start identifying what's that problem. And I think the problem and the solution that you're proposing need to be tied to a strategic priority of your elected leadership. Um, and so identify how this affects someone's quality of life, this solution, this project that you're working on. The second step is to do some analysis, a little bit of evaluation. For this project you're working on, who are the stakeholders? Write them down. What are their issues going to be? What kind of complaints are you going to be hearing about this? Think about that. Write those questions down. Think about the hard questions you're going to get. Start thinking about how we're going to answer those hard questions. Are there other agencies involved? There may be a county might be involved or a federal agency, the EPA. There's different agencies that may be involved in different kinds of projects. So make sure you identify those folks as well. And then start to put together a plan after you've done your analysis. How are we going to reach the public? Are we going to do some online engagement? Are we going to do meetings? What kind of outreach are we going to do that will best help us achieve the objectives that we've set out for ourselves? What does the timeline for the project look like? And where does the public fit into that timeline for engagement and how we're going to get this solution actually implemented? And finally, go out, implement that plan that you've put together. Go out and engage the public. And I think it's really important that as you're engaging the public, you let them know what you're hearing, that you also let them know what you think about what you're hearing. So let me give you a quick example here of a project that I worked on in Round Rock before I retired, just to kind of explain how this process can work. We were extending a road, a 4-lane arterial road called Wyoming Springs. So the first thing we did is identify the problem. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is traffic congestion. And how does this tie into one of the city council's strategic priorities? Well, decreasing traffic and improving traffic flows has been one of the priorities in Round Rock for the 30 plus years that I have lived here. Traffic has been rated as the #1 problem in city surveys since 1998. So the problem and the solution were pretty simple to identify on this one. Then we just started to do an analysis. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the folks going to be most directly impacted by this road extension? And right now, Wyoming Springs tees into another road. And so all the neighborhoods around this T, we thought they're going to be most interested in this. So we talked about, well, what kind of questions are they going to have? What kind of concerns are they going to have about this? And we thought, a lot of their concerns are going to be about trees and the loss of trees. And so we knew that that would be a concern because the county had recently done a road improvement project of a nearby road. And that project almost got derailed because you had stakeholders who didn't want to see that roadway, that county roadway improved because they thought it would impact a beloved hike and bike trail. And this hike and bike trail runs along Brushy Creek. Brushy Creek is the main waterway that runs through town, and Brushy Creek is aptly named. There's a lot of foliage, there's a lot of trees around Brushy Creek. It's a beautiful location. But that creek is also a barrier to roads. It's expensive to build the kind of size of bridge that you need to get over Brushy Creek to keep traffic flowing. Excuse me. So, so we knew what kind of questions they would have. We thought about that. And then we also thought, what other agencies are involved? Well, of course, at this T intersection, there's an elementary school. So we knew we need to talk with the Round Rock ISD about how this road would impact them and what we could do working with them to make sure it's still a safe route for students walking to that elementary school. It also so happens that one stretch of this road, while it's in Round Rock, is actually because this particular road is right at the border of Round Rock and a municipal utility district. So that means the county sheriff's office does some of the traffic enforcement along this road. So we made sure we involved the sheriff's office in this process as well. That's part of the things you're looking at when you do this analysis and evaluation. And then we put together our plan. And that plan is, I think this is really helpful, is make sure you've got a simple, easy to understand timeline that the public can see so they can see what the process you're going to employ to get to your solution. And so for this particular project, this road extension, we started out with a preliminary design of the road. So we'd hired an engineer They're going to do a preliminary design of the road. Where's it going to be routed? Where's it going to cross Brushy Creek? And then at the next stage would be we're going to get some public input. What do people think about this preliminary design? After that round of public input, we would take that input and do a next draft of the design, kind of an interim design. We'd get some more public input after that. And then finally, we'd do the final design, and the city council would approve a construction contract. So those were the very simple steps in the program, but the public could see where they fit in along the way. And so we implemented our plan. We had an open house meeting at a community center. Again, I talked about this T intersection. School is over here. This community center is on the other side of Wyoming Springs Road. So we're meeting the public right where this project is going to happen, which I think is always a good idea. Don't make people come to City Hall. Try to meet them on their turf if you can. And so we listened, and a couple hundred people showed up to let us know they were not excited about this project, and they let us know why. But we had anticipated what their questions were going to be as part of our analysis and evaluation. So we talked to them about, hey, here's what the traffic counts look like today, and it's already gets pretty congested. Here's what they're going to look like 5 years from now. It's going to be twice as congested. And so that's the need for this program. And by the way, this meets one of the city councils, one of our elected leaders' strategic priorities, which is to improve traffic flows throughout the community. And so we got that engagement. We also put all this information on a platform that lived on the city's website. We didn't just engage on Facebook. We engaged on a platform that the city could control, that's not driven by the algorithm. It's just driven by, hey, here's the information we need to share with you. And it gives the public an opportunity to share their thoughts on the project with us. Now, I think it's really important as you're getting public input, like I mentioned earlier, to let the public know, hey, here's what we're hearing and here's what we think about what we're hearing. And so on this particular project, we got a lot of input, hundreds of questions, and we made sure that we had an answer to each one of those questions and comments. It's a 100-page document on the city's website, a PDF that shows here's all the engagement we got, here's what we think about that. That is so critical because what I have found in my experience is people people will go along with the project. They may not be excited about it, they may not love it, but if they have had a legitimate chance to provide input along the way, they'll grudgingly agree to grudgingly go along. And I mentioned that the loss of trees was kind of the real spark, the real pain point of this project. And so in that initial design, we talked about, we did a tree survey. We could tell you exactly how many trees we were going to have to cut down to build this road. And after that first round of input, where it confirmed to us, hey, people are really concerned about the trees, we're able to tweak the road design a little bit and the bridge design a little bit. And we could quantify, hey, based on your input, there's 80 trees now that we don't have to cut down that we had initially thought we would have to cut down. Are we still going to have to cut down a lot of trees? Yes, we are. It crosses Brushy Creek and there's just a lot of trees there, but we let folks know we're listening and we do care about that input. They weren't just giving input into a vacuum. We were listening. We tweaked the design. And when we had that second open house, when we showed the updated design, people were, again, not thrilled about it, but they started to understand better what we were trying to accomplish. And so when the final design was approved, and it was time for the city council to approve a construction contract, no one showed up at that council meeting. And in fact, that road is being is being constructed literally right now, about a 5-minute walk from where I'm sitting here. So it was a successful project. And it was built on that model is built on these principles. You need to match the method of how you're getting input to the moment. We talked earlier about town halls just not being very effective. Programs like the one Temple put together are much more user friendly and effective at meeting residents. Those open house meetings that we used for the Wyoming Springs project, we're able to meet people face to face. They're able to see, okay, there's competent professionals here. Those are the kind of methods that build credibility, that build trust. Again, folks may not be excited about the project, but they're going to know there's smart people working on it and they're working on it for the right reasons. Um, you also need to make sure you're building your internal capacity to do this kind of engagement. Doesn't just happen. You need folks who are trained up, and that's part of what we offer in this half-day workshop, where you'll get a lot more depth than I've been able to share with you here today. Um, and so you need to make sure you've got your people trained up and equipped to be able to handle these kind of conversations. But you also need to make sure you have those online platforms that I talked about. You don't want to be just relying on social media for your online engagement. Again, 70% of the sentiment that gets expressed, particularly for projects like this, 70% of that sentiment is the exact opposite of what the general public thinks. I can assure you the general public in Round Rock wants us to build the roads that keep traffic flowing here. Now, it gets a little different when that road's in your neighborhood, but again, as a local government, you are charged with doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and you mitigate those pain points where you can. And so we made sure we had a platform in Round Rock where people could come to the city's website. We could share all the information we had about the project, and then they could give us the input. And it didn't get the negative stuff, didn't get blown up by the Facebook algorithm. One last point here on these key principles. If your council has already made a decision about something and they're ready to move forward, don't go engage the public on it. If you're just sort of going through the motions with your citizen engagement, the public will figure that out. And that just breeds more cynicism and it just breeds distrust. So don't engage if something's already been decided. The good news here is we've got these AFI task force went out across the country and looked for what are some cities who are already doing great work with citizen engagement. And you can see three examples here of some online resources, and I'll share links with you in an email or whatever after the webinar. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel. These are practical, field-tested approaches that you can take, you can study, and you can adapt in a way that works for your community. Now, do a little bit of a shift here. Civil discourse is teachable. That's the good news. And you may be in an environment where, hey, you've built up your capacity, you've got folks trained, you've got the right tools, but man, the general public, those outside of the city, need some help. You need to build some capacity externally as well. One of the great things that this AFI task force did was they put together a course that teaches things like here's how you communicate with empathy. Here's how you make sure you're doing listening in a way that's effective. Here's how you can frame difficult issues without being confrontational. It's a 3 hour webinar, workshop, excuse me, complete with speaker notes, complete with participant handouts that AFI members can literally take off the shelf and go use. A lot of cities do leadership academies. You can incorporate this into your leadership academy. If some of your neighboring agencies, maybe your school district, maybe the county, maybe they're having similar issues like as you are at your city, if there's just externally, man, if things have just gotten bad, you can invite your homeowners association leaderships. If you get partnered with the school district, maybe they invite some of their PTA leaders and they participate in this workshop where they can learn the skills and just increase the level of discourse. But this is an area where the city can take a leadership role and offer this workshop to the folks in your community who are also interested in things in a positive, effective deliberation. You could even use it in new employee orientation as well. Again, just to give folks those skills. These are skills that are good internally as well as externally. Now, the AFI task force also studied what happens if you're in a community where things have really gone haywire? Maybe you had an officer involved shooting, or maybe you had a mayor or council member got uh, arrested, charged with fraud or embezzlement, where trust has just been blown up. Lexington, Kentucky created something called Civic Lex, where they literally have a third party, an NGO, that helps the city lead engagement. And so I pulled a screen off the Gov, the Civic Lex website, where you can see, and this is not run by the city, this is run by Civic Lex, an NGO, where they talk about what's going on in local government right now. What are some of the big issues facing Lexington right now? It's a neutral ground for people to engage with the city on, and it starts to again build that civic capacity that had that may have been lost for various reasons. And so, again, this is another model that the AFI task force found. And so there's really a lot of flexibility here, and that's one of the great things about I think my experience with SGR is we provide the frameworks and training, and then you take this information, you adapt it in a way that works for you and your community. So we'd love to keep this conversation going. I'm curious as to what may have resonated with you today. I know I covered a lot and not a lot of time, but we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you about this workshop that we've put together where you'll have more of an opportunity uh, to think a little bit deeper, a little bit harder about what are some of the challenges your community and how can we adapt, how can we change the way that we're engaging the public in a way that will help us be more effective in doing the things we need to do. How can we build the trust, start to rebuild that capacity, and build credibility with the public in a way that works not just for the local government, but that works for the community as well. So we'd love to hear from you about that as well. But I'm curious what resonated with you, Mike. I know you've been following along, and I will end this and I will stop sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Have a little more of a conversation here.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Great job. Couple of questions come up. One is you mentioned like 70% of what you hear, you see on that algorithm is not what the community wants. Can you give us a reference or like how did you come to determine that? That's a question that came up.
Sure. Kevin Lyons, who some of you may know, he runs a company called Flash Vote. And
Mhm.
so they're familiar with surveys. They help local governments and other governments do surveys so they can understand the real sentiment of the public. And so they've studied the issue where they have looked at projects. And so they do that statistically valid survey to see what the
Mhm.
general public really thinks. And they have compared that to the sentiment that's being expressed online. So that was a study that Kevin Lyons and Flashvote did.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's great. I think just being able to reference that, say that's a study that Flash Vote did, then that gives some substance to it for people.
I think it's one of the most important statistics that people need
Yeah,
because there's so much engagement online, and that's a good thing.
yeah,
You need and our elected leaders can sure focus on that, and understandably so, but take it with a grain of salt.
yeah, for
What
sure.
you're hearing online, it doesn't always reflect what the general public thinks, and usually it doesn't. So
Right, yeah. Another question came up is how do you recommend an organization getting ahead and staying ahead of the narrative? So if something's going wrong or there's a kind of a negative narrative out there that isn't really based on maybe the truth, how do you get ahead of that and stay ahead of that?
yeah, that's a great question. In my experience and my approach, our approach in Round Rock was, you need to be the one telling your story. And the best way to tell that story is not always with statistics and data. In fact, um, that's often the least effective way to do it. Um, Tell the story of your employees, how they're going about doing their work. But if there's some negativity, if there's some kind of a narrative out there, there may be a kernel of truth to it. And so I
Hmm.
would talk about that. I think one of the most effective ways to build credibility is if you've made a mistake, own it.
Hmm.
People do not expect perfection from their government agencies. They just don't. And in fact, you think you can maintain credibility if you deny that we made a mistake. But in fact, if you have made a mistake, particularly in the world today, it the truth will out. The truth will always out. And so you need to be the one, if you've made a mistake, to bring it up first, right? If you've made a mistake, if there's something you've made a misstep, or maybe you just miscalculated something that, we're human beings, that sort of stuff happens. You need to be the first and best source of information about your organization. And so that's why I say you've got to get good at telling your story. You can change that narrative, but it will take some time.
Hmm.
So that transparency and openness, day after day, week after week, month after month, you will start to earn credibility with the public.
I really like what you said there, Will, because very few issues are so black and white that there isn't a kernel of truth in somebody's criticism. But leaning into that and acknowledging it and sort of framing it as, yes, this is true to this degree, but against the backdrop of all of this, this is what we felt was the greater good. And then you just have to keep saying that, leaving it there.
Yeah, and I think that's why strategic planning is so important,
Uh,
particularly when you're dealing with difficult issues. And Mike and you and I have talked about this because sometimes when we're doing these, like this Wyoming Springs extension, sometimes the answer you have to give the public is yes in your backyard, right?
yeah.
Because we have a really serious problem that we're trying to address here around our, it's traffic congestion, right? We sit right on I-35 in between San Antonio and Dallas, and it runs all the way to Minnesota. It's a busy road. There's a lot of traffic. And so, yeah, so those are the issues that you need to deal with.
Right. So really appreciate it, Will. It's great. And if you are interested in contacting us about having Will come and do the workshop with your city, that's a half-day workshop. Just reach out to us. We'll make arrangements for it. That task force was made up of city managers and communication directors from leading cities that are a part of AFI. They did amazing work. And then Will's taken that and created something that we can really help your city with, so that it's not just information, but you can really jump into it and say, here's how we use this and apply it to a real world project we're working on. So would love to hear from you if you're interested in doing that. And any other things we can help you with, please reach out to us. Will, anything else you want to say about that workshop?
No, again, that AFI task force did a ton of great work. I mean, they did some really heavy lifting. And so, yeah, excited about the workshop because we, more than ever, we need to be a reliable source of information. Governing is only getting harder. Doge is coming to local government. It's already come to a lot of local governments. And so you got to be able to tell your story in ways that engender trust. You need to be known as that reliable truth teller. And that's kind of that's some of the meat that's in this workshop. How do you do that?
Yeah, and it's so important because we don't want to spread misinformation. We don't want to be trying to sell people on something that isn't true. We want to do what's right and tell what's right. And I think this workshop helps cities and counties be able to do that. So, Will, thanks again. It's been great. And if you want to reach out to us, do so. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week, and we will see you down the road.
See everybody.